Hi.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, Nadine. How are you?
I am doing really well. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited. Today is a very exciting day. Fun. Yeah, we will get to that in a
Yes, we
little
will. Yes, we
bit.
will. Very shortly.
So, welcome everyone to another Askable Adults Live, the show where we talk all things sex ed, community, and gender affirming care services. But before actually starting, we wanted to take a moment for our usual acknowledgments and recognitions, and that is that Black Lives Matter today and always. Especially during not especially but during Pride Month is also important um to mention that queer Black lives matter, trans Black lives matter. I think, and we touch a little bit this conversation, but I think there's very important to also um give space to Black queer identities, because sometimes I think the many aspects of the LGBT community can become very white centered. So it's very important to, when we say Black Lives Matter, is that all Black lives matter, including trans lives, gay lives, lesbian lives, pansexual Black
Right.
lives, all Black
All Black
lives
lives
matter.
with all their intersectionalities.
Exactly.
Yes.
Having said that, who are we? Danny, do you want to start today?
I can. My name is Nadine. I am the community liaison with Berks Teens Matter. My pronouns are they and their. And I'm going to give a little disclaimer because I'm also very excited about our show today. I think that the weather, for some reason or something, I'm not sure what, has me doing a lot of yawning all of a sudden. So if I yawn during the course of our time together tonight, it's not anything having to do with what's going on here. It's just something that I seem to be not able to get enough oxygen. So just let me put that out there.
And also Nadine today is carrying rocking a sweater.
I am, because it was cold out this morning.
And I was like, Nadine, what's happening here? It's summer. It's summer. Don't
I know,
take
but it
away
was
this.
cold out this morning, Jonathan. I had to change. I had one thing on. I had to pull out the sweater.
So I'm Jonathan Rodriguez. I use he, him, and el pronouns, and I'm the Youth and Health Resource Center Coordinator for Berks Teens Matters. And today, and we have one of our VIP members, Gina, saying that it's okay. She's been yawning since she woke up this morning. So yeah, so as you may know, June is Pride Month, and we've been discussing many different topics that are important to many folks in the LGBTQ plus community and their allies. And speaking of which, today we have an amazing guest to tell us about the services that are available for transgender, gender variant, and gender nonconforming youth. So please give it up for the family support and education specialist at the Gender and Sexuality Development Clinic at Children's Hospital, Philadelphia.
Wow, that was a mouthful.
Samantha King. Hi, Samantha.
My running joke is that no one can say my name and job title 5 times fast. So, great job.
Hey, that's definitely a challenge. Well, Sam, hi, how are you? Thank you for being here.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're really grateful for your presence here today.
Absolutely. So Nadine, do you want to start?
Yeah. Sam, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, finally known as CHOP by a lot of people, offers many services to families, but you all have this gender and sexuality program. Can you tell us a little bit about what services are provided as a part of that?
Of course, yeah. So our program here at the Children's Hospital, we work with families who have kiddos and children who are talking about gender. So we are really open-ended approach to the support that we provide. Essentially, we are here to help support all of our families, all of our youth who are navigating gender in some way. So we have families and guardians who will reach out the day after their child shares really strong language of this is who I am, and they're right out the gate looking for support. And we have families who reach out to us years into their child's gender journey and gender transition. So at any point someone needs anything related to their child's gender, we are absolutely here to support in many different capacities.
Awesome.
Wow. Can I do that? What is the age range? I mean, what is the youngest that you've ever?
It's a great question. So we can support up through someone's 21st birthday. So the day they turn 22, then we refer to adult care. The youngest that we support is really as soon as kids start talking about gender, which we know happens around age 3. So if families are starting to hear a young one talk about gender in any capacity that they're looking for additional support, we can help provide. So typically the structure when we're working with younger kiddos is actually just through parent support. So any parent, guardian, loved one who has a kiddo really under the age of 8, and they're looking for support around gender for their child, we will do parent-only education and support, because everything we're offering at a young age pre-puberty is really just social care and social support. So that really relies on the caregivers of a child. So we say age 3, but it's not necessarily that we're seeing a 3-year-old come into our clinic. We're actually working with the parents and guardians at that point.
That is pretty amazing to know. I hadn't even thought about that before this moment, but it's just pretty amazing to know and pretty exciting to know that parents can get support that early on in a child's life.
Yeah, this isn't in parenting handbooks, right? So many parents just don't even know that kids can start talking about gender at this age. And then once they do, how do I even Google and how do I even know what to look for? So helping to streamline that, because it can be really overwhelming and not knowing where to search, that we absolutely wanted to make a priority for parents and caregivers to at least feel like they have a space to reach out and give them some direction.
I'm really glad to hear that. And now when kids are a little older and they're coming to you, you also do something called a comprehensive gender assessment. What? Can you tell us a little bit about what that involves, what that entails?
Absolutely. So since we are a pediatric hospital, we are structured differently than medical systems who are supporting youth 18 and over. So typically medical systems that provide care to someone over the age of 18 are built on a medical assessment model, meaning they'll meet with a medical provider right away. Since we're doing pediatric care and we really need the involvement of legal guardians, we take an initial approach through the lens of behavioral health care. So our comprehensive gender assessment is really a space that is structured around similar to a therapeutic model. We're not providing therapy, but we are providing a strong, welcoming therapeutic space to invite the entire family system into the care for this youth. So our comprehensive assessment model really looks like meeting each family at their moment in their journey. We recognize that people, again, are having their own unique experiences with gender. So we also don't take a cookie cutter approach. Our assessment is not like a tool that you can Google, comprehensive gender assessment and figure out, what tool someone is using. It's really meeting a youth and their family where they're at in their journey, and being able to learn more about what does this look like right now, and in what direction are you hoping that it can grow? Are you thinking, more social supports? Are there any medical concerns or medical goals that might be an immediate need or a future need? How can we help build that family support system around an individual to make sure they're getting the care that they need when they need it? And really recognizing that the family unit plays such an important role in someone's overall wellness. And so really being able to try to meet a family system, again, meeting those guardians, meeting those people who are taking care of this youth, to really build their understanding and support so we can get them into a space that feels comfortable and supportive and affirming for an individual, because we know that's going to result in much better mental health, physical health outcomes for that individual.
Wow. And that is amazing. Because I've talked, well, not necessarily with the actual parents, but I've spoken with friends that have family members that are going through, oh, my kid said that they're transgender. I don't even know what that means. And I'm like, okay, so, well, first of all, you need to educate yourself a little bit.
Right.
But of course, you need to reach out. You need to reach out to services that are not only for them, but also for you as a parent. And it's great that, you can provide this comprehensive assessment that, takes them from where they are to where they want to be. And I think that is so important to let people know that, this is not as you arrive at the hospital and it's like, okay, here are hormones. You have a daughter now. It's like, make it easy. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
That's sort of the magic wand approach. They don't do that.
Exactly. And speaking of which, what's the process to obtain the services from the program? Do folks need a referral? Or can they, for example, contact the program directly? We actually encourage families to reach out directly. So I really like to hear directly from the guardian or from the youth. We can have a provider put in a referral, but it's not necessary. Where we might need a referral is just based on someone's insurance for the actual appointment when that happens. But initially, in terms of reaching out to our clinic, we actually start by completing an intake. That intake can happen over the phone or through email, recognizing that sometimes people aren't in confidential spaces to answer questions about their child or about themselves. So if email is a more comfortable form of communication, we can do that too. And our intake really gives us an opportunity to, again, learn where someone is at in their gender journey, where is someone sharing happening, who's in the family system. Sometimes we have one member of a family reaching out, but they're the only person that this child has communicated to. So who else is in that care network that we might need to help support in that sharing before they come in for an appointment? So we can kind of get a snapshot of what that family system looks like. We like to learn about school environment as well. So an additional resource we provide that I actually do is all of our education advocacy. So right now it's our summer rush and people are, into their summer break and thinking about what the fall is going to look like, especially coming out of the pandemic, going in person for the first time potentially. And what do they want that to look like? So we can learn a little bit about their school goals, educational goals. And so we can work with them prior to that assessment taking place. We can offer some resources around school. And then we also learn a little bit about mental health as well. Are there any additional needs that someone might have, whether that's therapy or support groups, that again, we can offer those resources at intake without having someone having to wait, the 3 months to get that first appointment. So our intake really lets us see what else could be helpful or useful to the family while they're waiting to have that first time appointment. That's awesome.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
Yes.
Before you even meet them. And so now I have to ask, I have two questions going on here now because you mentioned insurance. So one question about
That's that too.
does insurance, and then a second question I'm going to say out loud so I don't forget it. Has to do with, like, if somebody reaches out to you, say by email or by phone, what's the turnaround between the time that I would reach out to you and the time that you would get in touch with me to get all that information that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so reach out time initially is really quick. So email wise, it's hard for me to separate from my email. So people usually get a response within 24 hours. We now have a new staff member, a new office administrator who's now able to answer the phone live. So if someone calls, they actually are more than likely going to be able to talk with Ryan right away, who can set up if they want to do the intake over the phone. Our social worker, Kellyanne, does that, and she usually can schedule within that week that they're calling to do the intake. So the first initial reach out, we try to make happen really quickly. We don't want people, waiting or feeling like they need to follow up a bunch of times just to have that initial conversation.
That's pretty amazing. And so then if they do follow up and they do that initial intake and then they want to come in and see you, does everybody's, we know insurance is always on people's minds.
Yes.
How is that handled? Does insurance cover these services?
Yeah. So our clinic really likes to have a very transparent approach to the work that we're doing. So prior to scheduling, we actually reach out to insurance companies on behalf of the family. So we will run our codes that we use for billing. We'll make sure that they are ones that are going to be accepted by their insurance plan. We'll find out if there's going to be any out-of-pocket cost associated. So we'll get all of that information ahead of time. So a family knows even before coming in for that appointment what to expect financially. One of the benefits of being associated with a medical institution is that even though our first appointments are through behavioral health, they can be coded as a medical consult, which means insurance speak is a lot easier to get things covered because we don't have to worry about behavioral health benefits. So we oftentimes are able to actually go through medical benefits, which makes it more accessible for families to use their insurance. We can take any insurance that is accepted at CHOP. And we're paneled with most insurances. And then if there is a challenge with insurance, let's say there's a specific exclusion that wouldn't allow someone to be billed through our department, we can work with them to make sure that they're either getting connected to an affirming provider who is in network. We can help make that transfer, or we can help provide all of that social support I mentioned completely free of charge. So then maybe they're not getting the full assessment, but they can still access the resources and supports that they need if there is either an uninsured individual or someone who might be underinsured. We can really try to make sure that we're not just saying, well, sorry, we don't take your insurance. Good luck. Like, absolutely not. We are always working with families to figure out what can we do to help support. Or even if insurance covers, sometimes those deductibles and those out-of-pocket, the co-pays are astronomical. So, what can we do to help offset that financial burden?
Wow. That's amazing. And when you said that you contact the insurance, that's what it means to be insurance advocacy, or okay.
That's a part of it. So additionally, we do, for the first initial visits, we want to just know office visit wise, can someone even access those services? The additional layer of insurance advocacy that we offer is thinking about those additional supports that might happen for someone. So thinking about potential therapeutic resources, but oftentimes a lot of our insurance advocacy happens around medication. So the medications we use for puberty blocking, for example, require a lot of insurance advocacy. So really making sure that we're getting the correct coverage, very expensive medication. So we need insurance to cover this. And so we have a team of financial coordinators that make sure that insurance gets everything they need to process and bill and cover appropriately. We also have a social worker who does a lot around surgery support. So, when someone is ready to access surgery supports, there's oftentimes a lot of documentation that needs to be sent to insurance. So our insurance advocate will make sure that the family knows exactly what to send, the patient knows exactly what they need, and how to call on their own behalf too to figure out what is going to be covered as well.
Awesome.
There's a lot of, I'm just listening to you and I'm thinking the kind of holistic, whole person, whole family healthcare that you all provide is something I wish was available for everybody in every arena, because seems to me like that's what that's the kind of healthcare that fosters health.
Yeah,
that we all need.
There was no other way to do it, right? Like there's just, the alternative was to just be like, sorry, this isn't going to be covered. And that just did not feel okay in any respect. I think that's what happens probably when you have a core team that's all social work, licensed professional counselor background, that we are trying to take a really holistic look and different approach to medical care. But there was no alternative that we saw. So it's definitely extra work and required a lot of additional education on our behalf and energy, but there was no other answer to that question of what can we do? We had to do it. We had to figure it
out. That's a beautiful response. So you mentioned this a little bit, but could we just maybe re-emphasize it, that you try to link people to gender affirming providers beyond your walls? So how do you do that? Like, I mean, we're out here in Berks County that is a little bit of urban, but most people consider rural. How would you do that for folks? And do they need to be your patient in order to connect with that?
No, never. So, and initially too, upon reach out, if someone's saying, we maybe aren't in a place where we need a full assessment from the gender clinic, or maybe we're in a place where we just want a pediatrician who, doesn't make assumptions about our child's gender and knows how to approach, we don't need you to be in the CHOP system to provide those resources. So that's really where we start to connect with providers in other areas. Also recognizing that the biggest importance is that convenience to care, right? So especially for our families well outside of the boundaries of Philadelphia County, what can they do on that immediate access, wanting to have those providers available? We'll say if there's any providers who are listening to this now or will listen to this in the future and you want to learn how to become a gender affirming provider, reach out. We will give you all of the tools. We need people. And if your call to action is just like, hey, I feel compelled to do this, like, we will help you. We will help you do this. Wow. We need more people. And it shouldn't be that people have to access a specialty clinic at CHOP in order to receive gender affirming care. Gender affirming care is using someone's name and pronouns correctly. That's what we need. We need more pediatricians who understand the importance of that work and how we ask questions and being able to build up our referral list. So, we'll reach out to providers. We'll hear from families, hey, our pediatrician's been great. And we'll reach out and say, hey, would you be open to us allowing your information to be shared with other families who might be looking for someone to switch to? So it does not have to be a specialist. It really is just someone who's affirming and kind and caring and willing to do some of this work and lean into it. And we will help give those resources to make sure that happens. So, we are always looking for community members. We do not want this to be a silo that you have to come to CHOP to receive this care. We want this to be spread far and wide.
That's awesome. And you mentioned, having community members, you mentioned, having more help. We know that part of the services that CHOP provides is helping parents to cope with their kids' transition, and they also provide support groups. But, sometimes there's more kids in the house, there's more people in the house. So there's at least the support groups are also for the siblings. After all, the process is not only for the parents and the transgender kids. Sometimes, a sibling is having, it's discovering another sibling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So our support group specifically, so that is one thing where one of our services, in order to access our support group, you do have to be connected, have gone through that initial assessment. For our program, we try to keep the community closed in that respect. So if someone is connected to our program, we have a sibling group. We also have an extended family group as well, an amazing group of grandparents, extended family who have created this amazing network for themselves. But then we also, again, keep additional resources. So one of my biggest community connections is PFLAG. So I always reach out to PFLAG when I have a family who's, not ready to connect to CHOP, or maybe it's just too difficult to attend our groups. What does PFLAG have? And most of the time PFLAG is really centered around those immediate guardians. But what's beautiful about PFLAG is they then create their own subgroups. So oftentimes, you have these groups at PFLAG who then have said, yeah, we actually just happen to have kids all in the same age range who all have siblings in the same age. So now they have their own separate groups that happen while the parents are meeting. So I think whenever I'm struggling to find something too, PFLAG is always my go-to. Just, hey, what have you heard, or what do you know? And then there's a lot of great online support networks and communities as well. I know Gender Spectrum has, it's called The Lounge. Their grandparent group is, I have heard rave reviews from all of our grandparents as well. So the grandparent group through Gender Spectrum, I believe they have a sibling support group too, but Johnathan, your point's exactly correct. It's not just the trans or non-binary kiddo, right? It's the entire community around this child who we need to call in to support as well. So it's the family system, that's the neighborhood community, that's the school advocates. It's really everyone around this individual who needs support as well, to better affirm this child.
That's great. It's so great to hear that it's not only for the kid going, undergoing the transition, whatever transition that is, social, legal, medical, but also, it goes beyond, the services go beyond. And I think it's so important for everyone to know that this is not a thing that is happening with this kid only. You need to work with the whole family dynamic, because, you are essentially are meeting almost a new person that is emerging from this kid, because of course everyone has perception about who this person is based on their gender or their experiences, but now we're allowing this kid to tell us who they are. So I think that's also very important for everyone to have in mind.
I'm just amazed at all that you do to really help create or help families create a real supportive environment for themselves and their communities. That's phenomenal. Again, if everybody could have that, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or any other thing that might label them as somehow different. If everybody could have that, wow, what the world would be like.
So something that we would love to discuss with you, because since we're talking about support for teens and that it literally takes a village. We would like to also discuss the legislative attack on transgender women and girls that happened just a few months ago here in the US, in which in many states, transgender girls and women were banned from playing sports based on their gender identity in many states. Basically, the argument for this ban is that by allowing transgender girls play into women's sports is actually creating more disadvantages to cisgender women and girls. And having said that, there's a lot of misinformation about transgender athletes, especially when it comes to understanding hormones and biology. So one of the transitions that transgender or gender expansive person could go through is medical, and this one can involve hormone therapy. Could you explain to us how hormone therapy works?
Yes, I'll give you the Cliff Note version. Well, just like when we're doing our initial social intake, support gathering, again, it's incredibly unique and personal. And the same thing is true for medical care. There isn't a specific treatment plan that fits every single person. There's so many different, medical options. There's so many different ways that the bodies react to medicine. So that's another thing too. When we start talking about biology, I think it's also just really important to acknowledge all of the assumptions that our society places into that binary of biology. There's this assumption that male equals testosterone, which equals a specific look and build of a body, and female equals estrogen, which equates to a specific look and image of a body, right? And that's just not true. Every single body has testosterone and estrogen. So to say that there's this unfair advantage is actually eliminating how hormones even work in all of our bodies already, right? So thinking about that and just thinking about genetics indicates how bodies build and progress and look based on the influence of higher levels of testosterone or estrogen. So when we start thinking about hormone therapy for individuals, it's also being able to recognize that that outcome looks so different for every single person because of our genetics, because of just how bodies respond to hormones. So there isn't one specific look or approach to what hormone care is going to be. And yet we have this media image of what it looks like to be transgender, what a medical transition looks like. That just is not true. I think there's I forgot to mention this, but if you want to dig into how we have come to, as a society, view and create our assumptions about trans people, there's an amazing documentary on Netflix called Disclosure that really looks at trans representation in the media. And I think that's really where we start to see a lot of skewed information about how people expect trans bodies to look. And so I just like to say that as a blanket statement, because there's also a lot of complexities with hormones for cisgender people as well. And yet we oftentimes are not expecting that to be the case. So when we start to think about trans people accessing hormone care, and I know there's going to be a question about puberty blockers, but there is options for someone as they start to go through puberty to help suppress some of the effects of puberty. But post-puberty, we can start thinking about the different options that people can access, oftentimes through the form of testosterone and estrogen. Where these specific bills are targeting is trans women. So thinking about transgender women and their access to athletics. So one, it's a misconception that every trans person goes through a medical transition. So that's not always the case for everybody. But for trans women who, let's say, are going through a medical transition, they're taking estrogen, they're taking androgen blockers, that's actually suppressing the levels of testosterone in their body. So if someone is taking estrogen, is taking an androgen blocker, their testosterone levels are lower. So just thinking about the ways, again, in which our levels might change based on our medical plan for each individual. I also think it's important to note that this legislation is, again, we have to remember, is targeting students, K through 12th grade students, right? So we have young children who are just wanting to connect to sports teams. These are not Olympic athletes. These are not professional athletes. These are students. These are children who are connecting to athletics. So when we get to the professional level, there are actually every sports athletic institution, the Olympics, professional athletes, they have specific regulations for making sure that hormone levels are not at a huge change for individuals, right? But this is just for student athletes. I'm sorry, can you hear me okay? I think I might have froze or okay. I'm sorry.
I can
Don't
hear
worry.
you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I think you got frozen for a second, but I think you're okay.
No, he's gone.
No, he's gone. Well, I'll continue. But when we think about hormone care, again, we have to remember that we're thinking about youth. We're thinking about adolescence. That it's really, again, what access someone has, and for someone who is on a medical transition plan. For transgender girls competing in sports, their testosterone levels are lower. They're in that range of more typical to cisgender females as well. So there is no unfair advantage of having higher levels of testosterone than their cisgender athletes. And in fact, actually, some cisgender females might actually have higher levels of testosterone than a transgender girl who's medically transitioning, just because, again, we all have testosterone in our body and the levels are different based on each individual.
So it's all a very individualized thing, which is part of what makes any kind of hormone treatment, regardless of somebody's gender identity, like a very tricky thing, because it's a very delicate kind of process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So every time I hear about these bills that have been in the legislature in the various states around the country, everything that I've heard also indicates that the people who are making some of these decisions and putting forth these bills for passage do not have the specialized and nuanced level depth of understanding of what they're making decisions about, really, and how that impacts young people.
Absolutely. None of these are the medical providers who are, doing this care, who are working with transgender patients. None of these are people who have that level of awareness. And what's equally frustrating, which we also saw and continue to unfortunately see with conversations around bathroom usage, right? There was this rhetoric that people were accessing going to the bathroom and that was going to increase the rise in assaults that were happening in the bathroom. And that just is not happening. It hasn't happened. There's been 0 cases of a trans person assaulting someone in a bathroom. In fact, trans people have been assaulted.
I was just going to say they would be more likely to be assaulted.
Exactly. Yes. And this sports legislation is taking a similar approach, right? They're saying that if we allow trans women to participate in athletics, that they are going to and are dominating the field of athletics. And that's not happening. We have zero cases of trans women completely dominating in athletics, even at a professional level, right? It's just not happening. And so again, it's that, hypothetical, that extreme what if outcome that just is not happening and has never happened. And so being able to help give that education, unfortunately, oftentimes people who are passing these bills and making these decisions just aren't interested in learning that information, are really stuck on that extreme variable, even when we can prove that it's just not happening.
Yeah. Which then kind of seeds a fear reaction in people, say, for example, in this case, who may have fought for a long time for women to have some kind of equality in sports. Mm-hmm. It really touches into that. It gets wild, doesn't it?
It does, and it's complex, and there's a lot to unpack. And I think that's why it's so important to have these conversations, and we learn through being able to dialogue to unpack it. And it's really tough and unfortunate when at the highest level they're just really not even willing to engage in the conversation at all.
Conversations. The conversations are so important. Mm-hmm. And can I just ask you too a little bit about puberty blockers? I know we're I don't want to keep you all night, but because I also know that in some of the legislation that was being put out there, that also there was an intention to make it illegal for physicians to prescribe puberty blockers to adolescents. Yep. That sounds a little frightening to me. Mm-hmm. Could you educate us a little bit about the impact of something like that on real lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, really important to note that the medication that's being used for puberty blocking is not a new medication. So this medication is FDA approved medication that's been used for decades to help individuals who are going through precocious puberty. So children who are starting to go through puberty at an incredibly young age. These medications are used to help pause that hormone reaction to allow a child to age and grow and then start puberty at where we want in that bell curve of developmentally appropriate readiness for an individual. So I think it's important to state that we have been using these medications. We have not had any issues using these medications and have decades of research to show the efficacy and safety of using these medications. How we use them in for trans people and for gender expansive people is kind of similar in the same way that we're offering that pause. So puberty blockers are really just a pause. Once we take a blocker out of a system, the body's going to go right back into producing the hormones that are going to get it to the level of going through puberty. So by adding a blocker, we're allowing a youth more time to just think and sit and sometimes even just be a kid, to not have to think about gender or be worried about gender. And so that pause allows us to have more time to allow someone to develop, to think more clearly about what would feel comfortable for their body changing. It's tough in the throes of puberty when someone is experiencing the intensity of dysphoria as their body starts changing in a way that just is outside of the boundaries of discomfort. With puberty is life-endingly discomfortable, right? So it's just thinking about that discomfort that someone has, we take that off the table. We allow someone time to reflect without that anxiety, without that distress, to say what would feel comfortable. We have had some youth who, after being on a puberty blocker, say, okay, I'm realizing what's going to happen if my body starts going through puberty, and I'm okay with that because I've thought about it, I'm thinking and I'm reflecting, and that is going to feel okay for me now that I know what's going to happen. Take that puberty blocker out of the body, and the body just goes through puberty. Or we have our youth who say, I've been able to think about it, and I'm glad I'm not distressed, but I realize that going through this puberty is not going to be okay or acceptable. And so then we think about the timing of then putting them on hormones. That's going to, again, be developmentally appropriate, that their body's going to be ready for. So it's a whole team effort too. It's not just something that, okay, you're ready, here you go, here's your hormones, have a nice day, right? We're really timing it appropriately for an individual. There was another point I wanted to make about puberty blockers. It also can be really helpful for families, again, because they're completely reversible. And that's the point with it. By being able to be on blockers, it actually could prevent someone from having to go through surgery later in life. So once someone goes through puberty, there are effects of puberty on the body that cannot ever be reversed or changed. The only way to alter them would to go through surgery. So for example, if someone has a testosterone-based puberty, their vocal cords will thicken. Once the vocal cords thicken, if you remove testosterone from the body, the vocal cords are not going to unthicken, right? So we have to potentially have surgery later in life to remove some vocal cords, right? So we can prevent that distress that someone might experience from having a deeper voice by adding that blocker, by saying, how would this feel, or how would this feel comfortable, right? So we're preventing future surgical need by allowing this blocker, by allowing to figure out what sort of based puberty, estrogen or testosterone based, would feel best and most comfortable. So there's a lot of factors to think about, and that irreversibility is a big one.
Wow. The complexity of all of this has just gotten more complex, and my understanding is getting a greater appreciation for the complexity, and really understanding why having like a whole team of people who really specialize in this field is so important for people who are going through this process or looking at this process and questioning and wondering and exploring what they,
It's a lot more talking than prescribing. It's a lot of time that we just spend creating that space to talk through, to really look at all of those points and say, we don't want someone to be distressed. We don't want someone to experience discomfort. And so thinking about all of those different layers, what's going to be the best outcome, again, so that's not going to impact someone's mental health. The biggest thing is that the mental health of someone. And we know that not having access to this medication has caused people to end their life because they are unable to access affirming care, that they are going through something that can be prevented, that can offer something that's going to save someone's life, essentially. So it's life-saving medication, and to, again, not be open to hearing that information, to understanding the importance. And again, no medical provider is agreeing that these medications should be withheld from patients. All medical providers who are providing this care and supporting these youth are like, we need this medication. We need to be able to give this when appropriate. And their voices aren't being heard as medical providers either in what's being passed.
Yeah, it has to be, I imagine that it has to be really painful to be people who are dedicated to this work and are giving so much of themselves to this really important work in our world today, to have to be witnessing some of these things that are happening from really a place of ignorance in the genuine sense of that word, just meaning people being not informed and not understanding what it is that they are doing and how they are impacting other people's lives.
Yeah, it's hard. It's harder to watch the families go through that reaction. A big thing that we've always said is, regardless of what legislation tries to get passed, we will never stop doing our work. And it's really important that we always communicate that to our families, because I think there's always a fear that they're going to lose that access, and there's no way you're going to lose that access. So I think always constantly letting our families know that we are here, that we want, again, those providers in our network to always stay at the forefront of providing this care, even if there are some challenges in that legislation, because we can't have our families left to not know what to do or where to go.
Wow, that's really good to hear and to know that level of commitment. I think that you've spoken pretty well to the importance of gender affirming care and the consequences of not offering that or not having that available to people. Is there anything more I would like before? Is there anything more that you would like to share that we haven't touched on?
I think just remembering that, everyone has a gender and everyone has their own unique experience with gender, and that even if we don't understand someone's unique experience, we can still offer respect and affirmation and support. That I don't need to fully understand someone's journey to know what it feels like to have a name used correctly and have pronouns used correctly, and just to sit there and say, I love you and I support you and I'm here for you. That goes so far, especially for our youth. And being able to, as parents, if you're listening, know that there are people here to help support you in that journey too, that it's okay for you to not have the answers. It's okay for you to have a reaction to this, and that you have people you can call so that you're not alone in figuring out what to do for your child. And for providers, know that there are people here to help support your work as well. So gender is impacting all of us, and we're all coming at it from our own unique experience and our own unique lens. And there are lots of different options and opportunities for people to connect to care, regardless where they're at or regardless of what they need.
I want to thank you so much. I'm sorry that we lost Johnathan. I know that Johnathan is really sorry that we lost him as well, because I know he really wanted to be here, but we really do appreciate that. Was a wealth of information that you packed into a limited amount of time. I have the feeling that we might be inviting you back sometime.
Please do.
And so folks can just reach out to you by going to your website.
Yeah, that's the best way. We have lots of resources there, and then you'll see our contact information for email and phone to reach out. Okay.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for hosting and the amazing questions and information to share. I really appreciate you letting me join and inviting me in.
It's been a great conversation. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.